So, without any further ado, let me welcome back to the show Congressman Thaddeus McCotter. Some of you may remember he was briefly a presidential candidate this year. He serves on the House Committee on Financial Services, also the subcommittees on capital markets and government-sponsored enterprises, international monetary policy and trade, and financial institutions and consumer credit. And let's face it, he's one of our favorite guests. Welcome back, Congressman.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure, sir. All right, let's jump right into this. I want to ask you about this first. This just caught my eye. Obviously, one of your compatriots in the House is retiring, Gabby Giffords, and I just wondered what your thoughts were about that. I think everybody's just really glad she's recovering so well, but I had not anticipated her retirement. I wonder if you had.
No, and a lot of us as people across the country were rooting for her, and we're very happy to see her miraculous recovery to date. Obviously, she's made a determination of what's in the best interest of her family, what's in the best interest of her recovery, and I think all of us around here are going to be very sorry to see her leaving the chamber, but we're going to give her our best wishes and continued support as she continues to move forward.
Okay. I think we all can agree that whatever decision she's making for her health is absolutely the right decision. All right, now let's get into some politics. I know that you've been very outspoken about the SOPA/PIPA legislation, and I wanted to get your take on it. And of course, also want to find out politically speaking, what is your take on some of the conservatives that were co-sponsoring this legislation until very recently, like Senator Rubio, for instance?
Well, I think that in the age of globalization, you're going to continue to see issues arise that are new, especially given the technologies you're trying to deal with. And so to a lot of them, they considered it and I'm just speculating here, but I would assume they considered, intellectual property rights are very important. We see countries like the communist Chinese in a static, closed intellectual environment, being communists and all, that rely on trying to steal intellectual property. So I think they were trying to protect the private property rights of the intellectual property holders, and yet when you deal with a new technology, one obviously that is so interwoven so quickly itself into the fabric of our society, such as the internet and social network, what you're going to continue to see is, I think, attempts to try to balance the two. And with this, clearly, in my mind, it was overly broad. You had a lot of people, obviously, and a lot of institutions and organizations that were very concerned about the overreach of the bill that might infringe upon their First Amendment God-given right to free speech and the ability to communicate with each other. So I think that what you saw from a lot of the senators that originally had done so, when they found out that it wasn't going to be able to do the job that it was intended to do, the way it was intended to do, that it wasn't narrowly drawn enough, I think you saw them rightly come off, and I think they shouldn't be condemned. They should be commended, be they Republicans or Democrats.
Okay. Actually, I definitely was not trying to characterize Senator Rubio in any way. I was just trying to understand the logic that had gotten them there in the first place, and I think you stated it pretty well, that the idea of preventing piracy is obviously a good idea, but perhaps this piece of legislation just didn't get us there. They're telling me in the chat room, Congressman, they're having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's a bad connection or if maybe you could just speak up a little bit. I wanted to also ask you about the budget. Tomorrow marks 1,000 days since the Senate deigned to pass a full budget. I know that Speaker Boehner and some other groups have put out a couple of videos mocking them for this, but it's a very serious thing. It's one of the few constitutional things that the Congress is mandated to do. How do we get the Senate in this highly charged political season to do their job and just pass a budget for the American people?
Well, I think you're going to have to get a new Senate. I think the 1,000 days pretty much relates back to the time Harry Reid and company took control of the chamber, if I'm not mistaken. So what you're going to continue to see out of the Democratic Senate, and it's interesting because you have a Democratic president, you would think they'd be able to pass his budget, or at least some version of it. And I think you're absolutely right, Steve. What you see is a complete dereliction of their duty to do one of the fundamental things that the Congress is supposed to do. And so when they don't, I think that, especially after all this period of time, I think you just have to realize that it's going to take change within the Senate to actually get them to pass a budget. Now, we know that they've enjoyed beating up the House budget that we passed, the quote-unquote Ryan budget, but it shows that at least we're taking our jobs seriously and we're doing our duty, because if we hadn't put forward a budget, they'd have nothing to complain about. Now, I'd rather have them actually passing their own budgets so that we can engage them in the battle of ideas, should it be different from ours. But unfortunately, they choose just to sit on the sidelines and critique. That's not their job, and if they don't want to do their job, find some people who will.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to ask you, I want to try to phrase this exactly the right way because it's a little bit, I don't know, off the beaten path here. The EU has agreed to do the Iranian oil sanctions. And I think the question I have is there a quid pro quo with the United States on this? In other words, a lot of us are concerned that the United States is going to end up paying for an EU bailout. Do you see any connection between the EU finally getting on board with real sanctions against Iran on the oil and any possibility of us turning around and bailing out the EU?
No, not to my knowledge, nor should there be. I think the European Union is acting in its strategic interests. I do not think that they, any more than we do, wish to enrich an Iranian regime that is trying to enrich uranium to create nuclear weapons for itself. So I think the common sense, sanity, and a survival instinct have taken hold.
Finally. All right. This might be our closing question because I know you have a call you have to get on. I don't know if you're a fan of the TSA or not, but there's a report out that Senator Rand Paul, after going through a body scanner and having some anomaly found, was asked to be patted down. He refused and was apparently detained. First off, I thought there was something in the law that prevented members of Congress from having to deal with that, but
nope.
Beyond that,
we all go right through that line like everybody else.
Yeah, but do you have to be patted down?
I've been patted down.
Oh, really?
I had my hands checked. Yeah, scanning, everything. Yeah, we don't get special treatment here. And I think that if you look back, you'll see where John Dingell had an instance because the hip replacement, or he was taken aside. There's been other members taken aside. Rand's not the first, and he won't be the last if you do not comply with what TSA wants. Now, we have deep empathy with everybody because we go through the same thing ourselves. We travel quite a bit, back and forth.
Well, I guess the question becomes, and this is a question that's been raised by a lot of people, is the security really making us safer if we're spending time patting down senators and congressmen who really, I hope, are not threats to national security? We're not profiling based on criminal statistics. We're just saying, okay, this person is randomly the person we're going to pat down. I don't think anybody feels safer from that, Congressman. Don't you think we should fix that?
Well, I certainly don't think members of Congress should get any special treatment. I know they're trying pilot programs for all members of the public where you can be pre-screened. But I think that what you have to remember is it's going to continue to be a process. It's going to be one that bothers people. And I don't like when I get patted down any more than anyone else. But you have to remember what's happened. Now, if you start to talk about trying to determine who looks like a terrorist and who doesn't, the practicality of that is going to be very small because what's going to happen is the terrorists will start to find people that don't match the profile that you're looking for. They will do anything they possibly can. So as we continue to go through this, you're going to see TSA continue to be criticized, in some cases rightly. You're going to see continued attempts to try to make the process less intrusive, less invasive, without sacrificing the ability of people to travel without diminished, in any ways, threat to themselves and others from the people trying to kill them.
All right. Well, I guess there's always going to be a debate about how much freedom we have to sacrifice in order to
I don't know
if
it's a sacrifice to be screened when you go through an airport because you're choosing to voluntarily travel.
Well, that's always the argument, that it is not something that we have to do, and we volunteered to do it. So, like I said, there's always going to be that debate. I'm not necessarily debating it with you. Let me get one last quick question in, sir. I know you got to go because the chat room is asking me. You are for the Keystone XL Pipeline,
yes.
I assume.
Yes, I like jobs. I like energy. I'm old-fashioned that way.
All right. Well, do you think Republicans are going to be able to turn that one around on the president? That seems like a bad move for him because he's alienating the unions with that one.
He's alienating anybody who wants to see energy prices stabilized, let alone the opportunity to go down. He's alienating people who want to get back to work, and he's doing it to pacify the radical environmentalists within his own party. And that's a mistake. It's a mistake for the country. And politically, I think that the ramifications of it to his campaign, he will have made a bad decision in that case. It's interesting, though, that you hear a lot of talk about it, and you hear a lot of senators, even Democratic senators, that support it, but you still don't see the Senate doing much about it, do you?
That's true, sir. That's a very good point.
And that's why we have elections, Steve. That's why we have elections. Well, thanks for having me on. I got to go talk to some young students out here for the Right to Life rally.
All right, sir. Thank you for your time. Take care.
All right, baby. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Congressman Thaddeus McCotter.